regularly scheduled meeting of Tuesday, October 25th, 2022. Please join me for a flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The Assembly of the City and Borough of Sitka would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional first people of Sitka. With gratitude, we proceed on Tlingit Hani. Sarah, roll call, please.
Mayor Eisenberg.
Present.
Mr. Mosier.
Here.
Ms. Duncan. Here. Mr. Yestad.
Here.
Mr. Christensen.
Here.
And Ms. Himshoot. Here.
Are there any correspondence or agenda changes this evening? Seeing none, we do have ceremonial matters this evening. However, the person here to accept the proclamation is rushing over from another meeting. If it's okay with the Assembly, we'll move on to special reports and come back when she's available. Thank you. So this will bring us to special reports. Do we have anyone for government to government this evening?
Teal Olson, Sitka School Board President.
Blossom, are you speaking on behalf of the school board?
I am.
That'll come up in just a couple more down.
I jumped the gun.
Sorry to make you walk up here and walk back, and yeah, we will come to school board shortly.
Goodness, okay.
Thank you. Any government to government this evening? Municipal boards, commissions, committees? Municipal departments? School district? Hello.
It's been a long day. My apologies. Blossom Teal Olson, Sitka School Board President. Thank you for your time tonight. I just want to report that since Proposition 1 was passed, the Sitka School District is planning 2 listening sessions. Our first is October 27th from 5:30 to 7:30 at the Gushaheen multi-purpose room. The second will be held November 10th from 5:30 to 7:30 as well. And we will be accepting info, feedback at info@sitkaschools.org. If you put the student activity fund in the subject line. So we're moving ahead with listening to what our parents and families would like to do with this proposition, the funds.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then students and guests. All right, so we will jump back one item in the agenda to ceremonial matters. Tonight there is a proclamation recognizing Native American Heritage Month. I'll go ahead and read that proclamation, and then we do have Lisa Gassman here from Sitka Tribe of Alaska to accept the proclamation. Proclamation recognizing Native American Heritage Month. Whereas the purpose of Native American Heritage Month is to honor and recognize the indigenous people of our nation, and whereas the Tlingit, Haida, Tsimshian, and Eyak cultures of Southeast Alaska have much to celebrate in their varied and rich cultures, and whereas it is important that honor is bestowed on our state's indigenous ancestors and today's tribal elders, because if not for the survival and adaptive skills of those who have come before us, Alaska's tribal cultures may not be as strong as they are today. And whereas by continuing to teach the next generation to employ and respect their cultural and spiritual heritage, indigenous languages, oral narratives, and traditional foods, our state's local, regional, and statewide tribal leadership is nurtured and inspired to serve. And therefore, be it resolved, by the Assembly of the City and Borough of Sitka, that the citizens of Sitka honor our native peoples and recognize them for strengthening the diversity of our society. Be it further resolved, as mayor of the City and Borough of Sitka, I do hereby proclaim November 2022 as Native American Heritage Month and call upon Sitkans to commemorate this month with appropriate programs, activities, and celebrations. Signed and sealed today, the 25th day of October 2022. Lisa, if you could join me up front. It's a long road to get here. So again, just thank you to Sitka Tribe of Alaska for being such instrumental members of our community, and hopefully there'll be a full agenda of activities as there has been in the past. So thank you.
Perfect,
And
thank
if
you.
you want to say anything, or
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Assembly, for this proclamation. We do have a calendar of events that is coming out. If there is an organization that hasn't provided the tribe with information about an activity that you plan on hosting, please feel free to send that to Ann Davis at Sitka Tribe. Her email is Ann, A-N-N-E, Davis, D-A-V-I-S, at Sitkatribe, all one word, -nsn.gov. You can also call 747-3207 if that's easier, rather than emailing. We definitely appreciate this proclamation and look forward to seeing a number of activities throughout November.
thank you. All right, that'll bring us to persons to be heard. This is public participation for any item off of tonight's agenda, not to exceed 3 minutes for any individual.
Mr. Mayor, if it's okay, I will sit by the microphone. I'm Kenny Scaffoldstead. I'm busy.
Of course, sir. If you could just turn on the microphone so TV Dan can get a little bit of the recording. I'd appreciate that. And you're welcome to stand.
I'm used to standing. Thank you. I'm Kenny Scaffoldstead. I visit from Hoona. I'm a candidate for District 2 House of Representatives for our state. I wear many hats other than the Realtree camouflage hat. In my past, I was a public works director, I was a city council member, I was a rabble rouser, and then eventually became mayor. Been a construction contractor, construction operator, and commercial fisherman is my background. I'm introducing myself to the community of Sitka. Been here many times before, have friends and family here, but haven't had a chance to come and meet the local government. And so this is my chance, and I'm going to enjoy following you and your business down the agenda, and it'll bring up memories from my time there. Thanks for having me.
Anyone else to address the assembly this evening?
Good evening, Assembly. My name is Richard Wien. And as I start off basically every meeting, and that is, Sitka is an economically sensitive community, which is subject to the ebbs and flows of the economy, but not only the global economy, the national economy, the state economy, but our local economy. In addition, we are fully dependent on fossil fuels for all our goods and services. And just as a friendly fun fact, we just completed or it looks like they're getting to have completed the Sawmill Creek paving. And I'm sure everybody here knows that asphalt is one of the end products of petroleum distillation. And there are like 18 billion tons of asphalt poured in the United States a year. Think what it would be without it. On the other note, the Wall Street Journal last week published something very interesting which caught my eye. And that was an article that Bar Harbor is going to put a cap on ship size, tourist number, and number of boats. And I know that we've heard it here at the table that that might be illegal, but for some reason Bar Harbor is doing that. And Portland, Maine, this is in Maine, which is considered the Alaska of the East, though they say that Alaska is the Maine of the West, but that's another topic. But they are doing it, and you can do it, and this should be part of the tourist planning because it is legal, and there are a number of ways that we can, I'll say, control the flow and not be subject, like a sea anemone, to the tides where other people may be dealing with this. This is also another important week of economic indicators. We have the third quarter GDP, which is very important because we base our recessionary decisions on this third quarter GDP. I'll give you some puzzles which you can look up. We have the core PCE as well as the PMI coming out, and there are a number of other things, but all of these things really do affect Sitka. And one thing I have to ask you, when you give out a proclamation, or even for serving on the assembly, could you please give it out framed? Because I think it looks so much better. It's already ready to hang on the wall. And by the way, we should be celebrating American Native Heritage every day. Thank you.
Is there anyone else to address the assembly this evening? Seeing none, that'll bring us on to consent agenda. Excuse me.
I move to approve the consent agenda consisting of item A, approve the October 11th Assembly meeting minutes.
Second. Is there any public comment on consent agenda? Sarah?
Okay, on the motion to approve the consent agenda, Mayor Eisenbeis,
Yes.
Ms. Hamshoot,
Yes.
Ms. Duncan,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
Mr. Yesta.
Yes.
The motion passes 6-0 on item A.
Brings to board, commission, and committee appointments. Item B, please.
I move to reappoint Chad Gordon to a 2-year term on the Gary Paxton Industrial Park Board, Lisa Moore to a 3-year term on the Tree and Landscape Committee, and Greg Olson to a 3-year term on the Police and Fire Commission.
Second.
That's been moved and appointed, seconded to reappoint those names. Is there any public comment?
Good evening, Richard Wien. These are reappointments, and again, people who are reappointed should be lauded for their desire, should I say for more punishment, but for service, actually. And I think it's great that these folks are coming up. Greg Olson is was serving an unfulfilled term and is now being reappointed, and he's a former trooper. So he certainly has the skills to be on police and fire and offer great insight. And Lisa Moore is absolutely fantastic and certainly one of the backbones of Tree and Landscape. Very knowledgeable about trees and landscape. And thank you for, and also for Mr. Grodin for re-upping. So thank you very much.
Is there any other public comment on the reappointments? In assembly deliberation? Rebecca?
Mr. Mayor, Chad Gaden, Lisa Moore, fantastic. All of our applicants are fantastic. Obviously, they've already given service to the community, so I appreciate that. I do have some questions for Greg Olson. Could we see
Yes,
him
my
here?
understanding is he did leave a contact number that was willing to be reached at, Sarah. Is that? Thank you.
I can call.
has been forwarded to an automatic voice message system 90783.
I think that may give you the answers you need there, Ms. Imshu. We can, well, Mr. Olson, if you're out there listening, would appreciate a call back to, or a text message back to Sarah, or some way to try and get you on the line here so that we can ask a couple questions. Crystal, you had something?
Unrelated. But mine had to do with Lisa Moore, and of course, service is wonderful in any form, but the longevity, I just wanted to put it on the public record, 21 years of service, and one of the founding members on this committee was pretty substantial, so just wanted to point that out. That's all I had.
Anything else on these? Rebecca, are you comfortable going forward at this point? We can.
Yeah, I don't have any,
Oh, okay. I was just texting her to see if
I don't have any objections to any of these candidates. I just had
he-
some questions.
He actually read it, so he might be able to call.
No, we're making sure we get all your questions answered.
I'll try again.
Thank you.
Hi, Greg. It's Sarah calling from the assembly meeting. There's some questions for you. So we wanted to see if you would have a moment to answer them.
I do. I've muted my Lions Club meeting that I'm attending, so.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. We're on your appointment, and Assemblymember Himshoot had some questions about your or some questions regarding the reappointment.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Olson, and thank you for your service. It's incredible for us to have somebody with your expertise and background volunteering on our Police and Fire Commission. So I appreciate your service so far and look forward to more service in the future. I pulled up the, I guess, mission or the charge of the Police and Fire Commission, and it says to advise the Assembly concerning police and fire department matters, make recommendations concerning public safety, and undertake such other duties as the Assembly may assign. What does that, what does the back and forth between the Assembly and the Police and Fire Commission look like to you? What would you like to see for your commission in terms of advising the Assembly concerning police and fire department matters?
Well, I think that issues come from the Assembly, from the Police Department, from the Fire Department, from the City Manager. Then we take a look at them. We did, on the separate note, I know that the next meeting that we're having, we're hearing from a community member who has grave concerns about human trafficking and has given a presentation on that. So, I mean, I really don't completely understand your question, but is that kind of what you're looking for?
Yes, how do matters come to you? What are the things that you would advise the Assembly on? Like how does the Police and Fire Commission determine the issues that they will consider advising the Assembly on?
Usually issues that have come to us, as you know, we have the issue presented on snow removal. We responded back to the Assembly on that. Otherwise, I mean, we don't go out there and just root around for issues. We had the four-wheeler ATV issue came in front of us. I know we're going to be looking at the taxi ordinance at some point, as I understand it. Specifically though, I mean, we don't go out and like wave a flag and ask people to come in with issues.
Sure, that makes sense to me, but the Assembly could bring an issue to you and you would consider it.
Yeah, I think that's the charge. It's in the ordinance. this is the way the ordinance anticipates that the assembly at the bottom may decide that we should look into issues, and then we would, to the best of our ability, as long as we were qualified to do it.
Okay, fantastic, and I think the qualifications, all of our boards and commissions, we're just really pleased when people step up, and I think that's part of the effectiveness of our boards and commissions is it's a mix of community members. So thank you for putting your name forward, and thanks for your service.
Okay.
Is there any other assembly questions for Mr. Olson while we have him on the line? Greg, thank you for your time this evening. I appreciate you being available to answer assembly questions on your reappointment.
Okay, well, take care.
Yep, thank you.
Good day.
Any further deliberation from the assembly? Sarah, on the reappointments?
Okay, on motion to approve the reappointments, Mr. Yestad?
Yes.
Mayor Ezenbeis?
Yes.
Ms. Hipshoot?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
And Ms. Duncan?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0 on item B.
Bring us to item C, please.
I move to appoint Casey Campbell to an unexpired term on the Gary Paxton Industrial Park Board and Georgian Eliason to a 3-year term on the Ports and Harbors Commission.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to appoint the two names to the respective boards. Is there any public comment on the appointments?
Good evening, Richard Ween. In looking at the appointments and their CVs, curriculum vitae, Casey Campbell, and she's for GPIP, has a most fascinating CV, and it's just kind of too long to summarize it per se, but I invite people to spend a moment and look at her qualifications. It's very interesting, and I mean to imply that it's good. And Jorgen Eliason, well, he's for Ports and Harbor, and I know he's from good stock, so, but what's in a name? Anyway, I'm glad both of them stepped up. Thank you.
Is there any other public? Please.
My name is Kim Elliott.
Push the button.
On the very bottom, there's a...
Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
My name is Kim Elliott, and I live in the neighborhood. And not that I have anything against any of the Eliason family or otherwise, but I think that it needs to be a little bit longer deliberation because one of the members of the family happens to be the Port Harbor director for Sitka. And I worked for the harbor for 14 years. I know you're having some other stuff about the marine wall, and so I'll talk to you later about that particular issue, but I know it's been one since I worked there 30 years ago, 20 to 30 years ago, you know. And so it's about time. Other than that, I'll address other issues I have that you have on your agenda a little bit later.
Thank you.
Just wanted you to think about it, not because I have anything against the Eliason family. I highly regard them, but bit of nepotism in there.
Any other comments about the appointments? Assembly deliberation? Tor?
Yeah, I was just thinking, I don't think I have any, I mean, there's some big families in Sitka, and since, the Ports and Harbor Commission doesn't determine the harbor master's pay or anything like that, so I don't think I have a problem with it. I was thinking about this earlier. It would be very hard if no families could do in Sitka, because there's so many big families. And I don't see a lot of other people banging on our door, so. Although some of you guys may disagree with me on that.
Rebecca?
I had a question for John. I know that the harbor department is stretched when we have a cruise ship coming in at GPIP, because the harbor department oversees that dock as well, correct?
There's I'll call it a revenue sharing and a management agreement, but yeah, there's generally speaking 50-50 responsibility share.
Yeah, and Jorgen had written to us, you guys probably, some of you remember this, about concerns about having cruise ships landing at the GPIP dock, and I trust him to be impartial as a Port and Harbor's, I guess, commissioner or whatever, and so I think I don't really have big concerns about it, but I did want to bring up that previous communication. He's not here to answer any questions, but, is he here? Oh, could I ask him a question? I'm sorry.
We can always ask members to come and answer questions.
Okay, that'd be great.
Jorgen, if you're willing, please, there's a button on the bottom of the microphone.
It's nice to meet you. Sorry.
Okay.
So you had written to us about concerns about the dock at GPIP, and conceivably Port and Harbors would have some say in how that dock gets used, or that issue could come before you. The scope of Port and Harbors is so big that I don't really have a deep concern about it, but do you feel like you could be impartial, or that you could?
Yeah, for sure. And since it's been going on, like last summer, my view on that whole thing has definitely changed. As far as not having so much of a problem with it. It wasn't a problem for anybody else. It didn't seem like, so it's kind of.
Okay, I appreciated your leadership, and I know we had a conversation at the time, and that's why it stuck with me.
Sure.
So, all right, thank you.
Any other questions for Jorgen while he's up here? Crystal?
Just to go back to the previous issue, so obviously big families, that's very valid here in Sitka, and you would be, as you disclosed on your application, working with a family member. How do you minimize kind of the concerns that would obviously come up by seeing two similar last names?
I don't know really. Yeah, I don't see it as being an issue, I guess. I mean, obviously neither of us have anything financially to gain out of us working together in these positions. And, I mean, shoot, Chris and I are family too, so through marriage. But yeah, it's like you say, it's a small town, big families, and yeah, I don't see it being a problem, and I would for sure try not to make it a problem.
And I believe that as well. I am going to chuckle the first time that you come up and recommend a harbor rate increase, though. Because I know that's not the horse that you ride, but
Sure.
it's going to be a fun one. So.
Yeah, well, I understand. You have to do what you have to do, though, so.
Any other questions, comments for?
Well, I know like the whole family thing with Jordan, I don't see it as a problem. I've always thought that he'd be actually probably the first one on the board to potentially call Stan out. Jordan's always been a straight shooter, and I think Stan would actually, vice versa, Stan would call him out. So I really don't see it as a problem. I think they'd be able to work well together.
Thank you. Any other? Okay. Jorgen, thank you for your time this evening. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
And then Crystal?
Yeah, just to round out, I had made note to the fact that he disclosed that on the application, and I appreciated that. And then having the opportunity to further discuss. I guess what also came out through the application was 2 boats in the harbor system and just knowledge around Port and Harbor's issue, which is, I think, a strong point in why your application made sense. And then also just going back to volunteerism and how people are taking their time and committing to something, so I appreciate your service. So I did have that as an issue, and I'm glad we were able to kind of address it a little bit, and the application did a good job of presenting a fuller picture for me.
Anything further from the assembly on these appointments? Sarah?
Okay, on on a motion to approve these two appointments, Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Ms. Timshute?
Yes.
Ms. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Yestak?
Yes.
And Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
And Mayor Estes.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0 on item C.
There is no unfinished business this evening, so that'll bring us to new business first reading, item D.
I move to approve ordinance 2022-26, making supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2023, reconstruction of the sheet pile wall and crane at the Marine Service Center.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. John, do you have an introduction on this item before public comment?
Yeah, I'll give a really brief introduction. This is, as you know, we applied for the RAISE grant for the sheet pile wall in the Marine Service Center. And fortunately, we earned that RAISE grant, and now it's time to basically true up on the match money that we dedicated, or I shouldn't say dedicated, but approved through resolution. The team sat down with the granting organization, and they worked through what's allowable expenses and what's not allowable expenses. And as you'll see, the amount, the true match was $1,960,662. That was in the resolution, and the over and above on that, which it's going to take me a minute to dig that number up. Basically, it comes out to about 2.1 million is the match we're going to be looking for now, because the staff time on management of and administration of that grant is not going to be an allowable expense coming from existing city staff, and we estimated that to be about 16 hours of work per week. So this is essentially building that in so we can charge that work towards this project. So that explains the difference from the resolution to here, but I'm open to any other questions if you have.
Great, thank you. Is there any public comment on supplemental appropriations for the sheet pile wall and crane at Marine Service Center?
I'm back. Kim Elliott, Sitka. I used to work for the Port and Harbor Department, 14 years actually. Something like that anyway. And I'm surprised that the wall has held up this long. There was a lot of problems with it back when I worked there quite a long time ago now, 2007 I think was the last year I worked there. And the anodes were not put in correctly, so it corroded and there was other problems. And I absolutely feel like this is a very important part of the city's services, Port and Harbor services. My family has used that fort wall to lower stuff down onto the deck of our boat to take things to family island locations and other times. So I would really urge you to support funding this particular project. Thank you.
Other comments on ordinance 22-26?
Good evening, Richard Ween. As you know, this is item D, which is supplemental appropriations for the Marine Service Center sheet wall. It has a very interesting and long history about getting this thing fixed. Certainly the anodes have a starring role in all of this, and I love history. It was originally built in 1976, and at some point we actually tried to gave the notion of trying to sell it. And as important as this is to the community, I'm glad at the end of the day they did not. I am glad that there was the usual kind of prolonging how things are done, and that we were able to get the RAISE grant and finally settle this up. I'm also surprised, having read all the engineering reports, that all of these boats were still allowed to dock on it and to perform business, and it's still up. Because if you read the engineering reports, it was, we're going to die. And so it's just kind of an interesting thing. It's important to note with any of these things, this is a $9+ million project, and the RAISE grant is going to pay $7.8 million. But there's always a little catch, and this catch is called 20%. Now, the 20% of $2.1 million is not a small amount of money. And all of these things draw from our resources. And this is going to be split between the Marine Service Center and the Port and Harbor Fund. It's important to note that Port and Harbor at this moment has $3.4 million of undesignated funds as of June, so they're going to take $1 million out of that, and the Marine Service Center has about $2 million in undesignated funds, and that's since June 2022, and they're going to take $1 million out of there. So these are just healthy reminders. We need to do it done. It's an integral part of our port and harbor system. Has to be done, and especially with the Coast Guard cutters coming in here, available, I'll just say, land to utilize for our fleet is becoming more like hen's teeth. So it's a good thing. I know it's going to get passed. However, you always have to have in the back of your mind that that $2 million comes from somewhere. And always remember that there is a cost. So thank you very much, and carry on and vote for it.
Is there any other public comment this evening on 22-26? Assembly deliberation? Tor?
I just want to, I'm not sure congratulate's the right word, give kudos to the city staff who went out after the RAISE grant and put it together in such a fashion that we got it. I mean, those are highly competitive grants, as we've heard at length. And the fact that we managed to get that, because I think is because it was the grant package was put together so well, and I don't believe that was we've gone after this before. So this is a need we've known about for years, but we just couldn't figure out how to pay for it. And so I think John and his staff deserve a pat on the back for going out and getting this grant and preserving, you know, a very important part of our working waterfront.
Kevin?
Thank you. I was basically going to say the same thing as Tor, so ditto that. There were several years that the city did not have any one or team working on grants, and I know they're not the only source of, you know, sometimes we have to raise it ourselves, but we should be doing everything we can to try to get these, and I think this is hopefully the first fruits of many. And again, kudos and appreciate to John and everyone else who made this happen. This is not easy because everyone's fighting for this stuff, so I'm very grateful, and thank you very much.
Crystal?
Just a quick question. So with the 50-50 split between the funds, the revenue sharing, do you know what that looks like? Is that also a 50-50 split? I know it still has to be worked out, but just any kind of picture.
The simple answer is probably yes. I know that's not a direct answer, but we do have to work out the revenue sharing piece of it. And as we tried to outline in the memo, this is a tricky one because the port wall is a harbor asset. The Marine Service Center is a Marine Service Center Enterprise Fund asset. But one exists because of the other, and the wall is actually tied underneath two portions of the building, so if the wall fails, then the building is unusable. So, yeah, we had to find a way to kind of tap into both of those funds, but we also have to work on making the fund whole. So I would imagine something close to a 50-50 revenue sharing agreement, but we'll have to consult with finance to get that figured out.
John, I did have one question on your memo there. Comes in the last paragraph of the fiscal note. Talks about remain contingent until the formal grant award is executed, which is anticipated only after a significant amount of design and environmental reviews have taken place. Does this indicate that we would first use our match money to do the design and environmental reviews, and if we get to a point in both of those where this project does not look feasible, then we're just out the money? So I guess it's a two-part question. Does that come from our $2 million match, and then do we lose that money if we get down the road and this project cannot happen?
I may need to call Melissa up here for some help, but that's the way I envision it. You know, we have to do our piece of it, and we've done some preliminary work in the application. So we don't have, you know, formal design and environmental reviews done yet, but we have to get that work finished. I wasn't in the brief, so I don't. Yeah, I'll let Melissa speak.
Thank you for lending your expertise, Melissa.
When we met with the Raise Grant team, what they said was that we have to get through the environmental reviews. There's no reason, everything is pretty standard there, but to get to the environmental review, you have to get a pretty far along in design. All of that will be pre-approved by the granting agency to be part of our match. We will have spent the vast majority of what we're required to spend before we actually get that grant. And so once we get through there, we'll get all of the formal paperwork.
Okay, so, and this is just very worst case scenario. I believe our preliminary environmental studies have already indicated enough to go ahead, and I believe that's what the granting agency has seen as well. But if we get to a point at the very end where we're unable to go forward because of an environmental issue, does that mean that our $2 million or however much we've spent is gone, or can we draw from the grant?
No, it would be our working capital. We would have design and environmental approval to go forward, and no further money.
Okay, great, thank you. For the Assembly's benefit, I just needed to clarify that does not stop me from going forward on this project. We've worked pretty hard on getting this far anyway, and the asset is valuable to the community. So I definitely don't want to go forward, or definitely don't want this to prevent it from going forward, but just I think in a note for us as we do go forward. Kevin?
Yeah, and I think that was appropriate for you to bring that to the public's attention. You know, there is a level of risk that you're taking. I feel like that's appropriate at this time. But it was a good point to bring up.
Chris?
So, yeah, there is a lot of history with the seawall. I sat in on multiple meetings. One of the ones where we were talking about, do we sell it or do we keep it? And then another meeting was, we've decided to keep it, now how do we fix it? And this is a great opportunity. One of the ideas that was getting kicked around pretty heavy was not fixing it, but was pouring rock on the other side of it to make it no longer usable. So I just think this is a great opportunity to be able to actually fix it and be able to continue its use instead of what our other alternatives were.
Further Assembly comment? Sarah?
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2022-26 on first reading, Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeis?
Yes.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Ms. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Yestad?
Yes.
And Ms. Sarchuk?
Yes.
The motion passes 6-0, first reading on item D.
Brings us to item E.
I move to approve ordinance 2022-27, making supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2023, the data center and disaster recovery system.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Grant, I understand you have a brief introduction for this item.
Grant Turner, IT Director. Basically, our current setup for our data center involves just having all of our backups at a local storage unit that's actually part of the data center. So in order to create a better configuration for more robust service in terms of a disaster that should come along, we're going to have this put forward to allow for a physically separate location and plus a updated piece of equipment with additional storage, additional racks, additional storage for it to use, and more up-to-date technology to conform with current standards. And so there would be two pieces that would be upgraded. The existing unit would be doubled in size, and there would be a coordinated unit that would be at a separate physical location that would then tie together and have, so we can have basically a hot swap or pretty close to it should the data center have significant issues with that storage.
Great, thank you. And I'm sure we'll have some questions to call you back up for. Is there any public comment on item or on ordinance 22-27?
I just have a real short comment about.
If you could state your name for the record again, please.
I'm sorry.
If you could state your name for the record again, please.
Kim Elliott.
Thank you.
I don't know how many of you were here in 1972 when we had the last 7-point-something earthquake out 40 miles off of Mount Edgecombe. But I was here, and before there was any warning alerts or anything, I was at my family's island out by Silver Point, and I looked back. I was bringing my skiff in, and the smokehouse was swaying like crazy. And my mom was screaming at me to get to shore with the whaler because we didn't have a dock. And I got there, and I jumped out of the boat, had some friends with me, and I was a teenager. And I ran up the shore, and I looked back, and the tide went out as far as I'd ever seen it, way past that. And the next thing I knew, the water was swirling around my legs, and I was still running up the beach with the rock. So I think that anything that will help us to be prepared for those sort of things. If the tide had been high, we probably would have lost all of our harbors and a lot of other stuff. So we need to be prepared to be able to have way earlier warnings than what we had back then. Just saying is that when you see it and you're in the middle of it, then all at once it becomes, and we all scrambled up to the highest point of the island, because by the time they finally said anything, they said, well, we could have a 70-foot wave coming through, and the highest point on our island was 80 foot. So, just saying is that I think early warnings are critical.
Good evening, Assembly. Richard Ween. Just a note, Kim Elliott, we love your mother, and may she rest in peace. Technology is technology. It's always changing. It needs to be updated. My Kindle no longer accepts a 3G, so if I don't use a router, I can't get on. So this is a kind of a no-brainer. We need this done. And they all have lives. Their software has lifespans, etc. Some interesting things that, some questions I had is, on this backup, how many systems in the city are on this backup? How many computer systems do we have? Are they all independent? Do they all feed in to this? This system backup of approximately 82 terabytes is going to be it's going to be a lot of terabytes, which is increased from apparently 30, though the report mentions 20. It's a big jump. So is it going to cover the entire city? How many systems do we have to cover this? Now, we talk about a disaster. There are lots of disasters. Is in the budget, are these redundant systems? And redundancy in computing is very important. Are they going to have Faraday cages or some other things to protect against electromagnetic? Because in 1 second, all your data can be gone, even if it is at a separate location. Does the budget include, or we can be told where that separate location will be, or is it will be in the bunker? Is it a secret? Meaning, is it a budgetary item where we're going to have to put this, or do they have an idea or ready? It's $100,000 and the $5,000 a year for maintenance. All of these things need maintenance. What's interesting is it was mentioned that there was 20 terabytes, which was out end of life, and 5.1 terabytes are still open. So that means there's 15 terabytes used in backup. Is that true? And so what is the anticipation and change to up it to 83? Is there going to be that much data we're going to be getting from this day forth and forevermore? So there are a few questions. My basic question is how many systems will feed into this, or are we going to have to get additional backups for those systems? I think that assessor and planning and the library and everything else may need their own backups. So I think that needs to be clarified. And so, you know, always good to be prepared for a disaster. And I like Faraday, so he's a good guy. Thank you.
Any other public comment on 22-27? Back to the assembly for deliberation.
I do have some questions for Grant, if that's okay. So Grant, when I was reading this, I thought, okay, it makes sense to have separate backup. And I thought, well, if we're worried about being on an island, why aren't we just using something like Carbonite or AWS and just going straight to the cloud and backing up truly off island? I know that in my office we back up, and they have usually multiple sites. I think Amazon uses 3 separate data centers for all your data. So why aren't we doing? I mean, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but it's just that was kind of what I was wondering about when I was looking at this.
That is one part of the larger picture of disaster recovery preparedness. The use of using an off-site cloud-based storage for that sort of thing is definitely something we're going to be working on too. It's actually in the works already too, working on that. But this allows for more immediate recovery of data should any sort of ransomware sort of situation specifically. That's the biggest thing to really worry about at this point. That would allow for us to be able to back up stuff from that immediately without having to worry about the bandwidth and data transfer rates in and out of town with our limited bandwidth as it is. But yeah, that's where we have multi-tiered backup solutions. You have your immediate, local, physically disparate locations, then you have your cloud-based situation after that.
Answers my question, thank you.
Other questions for Grant while he's up here? Crystal?
I also had the question about the jump from the 30 to 82 terabytes, and it feels like that might be standard, or is that best practice, or where did that leap come from?
Basically, that's just essentially the 82 terabytes ends up becoming, I'm not sure that it's basically future-proofing at this point. Right now, our critical systems are backed up in our existing infrastructure. This would allow for additional systems to be backed up on there as well, plus allow for future-proofing to allow for more systems and more data storage on there. Data needs are only going to ever increase and only going to be more needed. So, and this allows for it all to be highly secure and encrypted storage in a redundant fashion, having it in 2 different locations.
Okay. And then related to the memo, so the cost was $99,000, and then just a little bit of clarity, and I apologize, usually I meet with John before and he clears up all of these questions so that I don't have to bring them up here, but is it after, do we pay $99,000 and then we start for annually paying $5,000, or is it after that 3 to 5 service window that the amount would be $5,000 on an annual basis for that service and upkeep?
It should start after that 3 to 5 year period.
Okay.
These cover that.
So the contract, we're not quite sure if it's the 3 or the 5 yet, but
Well,
that,
there's 3 different actual physical pieces of equipment. 2 of them have a 3-year, 2 of them have a 5-year, 1 of them has a 3-year.
okay. And then 10-year mark, this 99 will take us about 10 years out was the lifespan, so the next 99,000 outlay will probably be about a decade down the road if all goes to plan.
Yeah, relative costs as they are, sure. Yeah.
That's all I had.
Thank you. Grant, jumping on the back of the expanding the array to 82 terabytes, do we need all this at once, or are we able to spread out these costs over a couple of years? It sounds as if we don't need it tomorrow.
Well, in terms of getting it, we're going to use up a significant portion of it, yes. And the way that the actual data center or the storage arrays work with the encryption, they have actual internal redundancy within the storage units themselves. So that does actually end up using more than what it, if you have 10 terabytes of data stored on there, it'll take up more space than that 10 terabytes as part of how it works with the internal redundancies too. So we end up taking up a good percentage of that already. And the way that these work out, it makes more sense to add the storage when you're doing the whole upgrade all at once, when you have the technicians there getting it all installed for you.
Okay, yeah, I think I can understand that, especially with inflationary costs rising rapidly. It may not be cheaper to buy it a couple of years down the road and then install it later. And I'm assuming, we did get one quote in our packet. I'm assuming that we went out for multiple quotes within the procurement policy on this, and this just happens to be the best one.
This is our single source provider for this one. This is we have worked with our basically outsourced technology experts that provide us with a significant portion of our data center infrastructure. And so this is that same company that's providing that.
Great, thank you. And then my last question on this, we are supplementally appropriating the exact amount of the quote. However, the last line item is freight, prepay and add. I'm assuming freight is going to be pretty substantial. Do you have money in your operating budget to cover that, or because it seems like our appropriation is going to fall a little bit short after freight?
Oh, we should. I imagine we should have that in there.
Because I don't want you to get beat up again in 3 weeks when you realize that you're a little bit short on cash.
I'm not sure exactly what the next step would be for that then.
You'd come back and you'd have another supplemental appropriation, and then you'd have the same questions all over again.
So because this one is capital, it does all need to really be recorded and appropriated as part of that asset. So we probably do need to get that cost in there.
Do you have any idea ballpark?
Not rough, no, not exactly. I imagine it's not that large of equipment, but it's heavy, so.
I wouldn't imagine it'd be more than a couple thousand.
We can come back with an amended ordinance if that's easiest, instead of a lot of deliberation and questions, if that's okay with your timeline as well.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I'd rather just approve this so that we can get it word. Because we want to do this. I don't think it's going to be an astronomical fee. It's up to the body.
So Melissa, in order to get this project started, I'm comfortable with adding an amount of $5,000 for shipping, but if that entire amount is not utilized, what is the mechanism to bring it back into the general fund?
It goes right, it'll actually go back into the IT fund.
Into the IT fund?
Yeah.
So
Anything on any capital project that's not expended goes back to whatever source it came from.
So there, in your bookkeeping, accounting eyes, there is no harm in allocating a slightly larger amount at this point, which will then return itself?
Not at all.
Great, thank you. I move to add $5,000 to the supplemental appropriation. for freight.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to add, sorry Grant, there may be more questions for you, but I'm gonna have to open it up to public comment. It's been moved and seconded to add $5,000 for shipping to this supplemental appropriation. Is there any public comment?
Richard Ween. This is just a technical question. What constitutes a substantial change? And if it was $5, would because it's so little, or 5,000, or 100,000? So my question is to the parliamentarian and to the legal: does 5,000, or in essence any amount, act as a substantial change? If for no other reason, this is for the record. Thank you. Because I think $5,000 is a lot of money to me.
Is there any other public comment on adding 5,000 for shipping to the supplemental appropriation? Back to the assembly for deliberation. Sarah?
It's my opinion that it would need to come back for an additional reading, unless Brian feels otherwise.
I don't, because it's 5% of the supplemental appropriation. And under the circumstances they're dealing with.
Kevin?
If legal feels that it's not a substantial, I agree, based on the numbers, if it's under 5%, then that's within your guidelines of a substantial change, then I'm comfortable moving forward with it.
Any other assembly deliberation on the amendment? Sarah, on the amendment?
Okay, and the amendment to add $5,000 to the supplemental appropriation for freight. Ms. Himshoot?
Yes.
Mayor Eisebach?
Yes.
Ms. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Mr. Yested?
Yes.
And Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
The amendment passes 6-0.
That'll bring us to the original motion as amended. Further assembly discussion? John?
I'd just like to add a bit, since I didn't really say anything on the introduction piece. Grant did a great job with that. It's been 12 years since I was not a kid, but much younger, sitting at Purdue University for my schooling and sitting through a management information systems course. One of the things the instructor said to us is you can never spend enough money on IT. And he was talking about that in a sense that it all depends on what level of risk you're willing to accept to protect your systems. Our systems and our data belong to the citizens here, and providing that protection for our citizens and taking that risk off the city is very important. And I think that Grant has done a great job analyzing our security risks and what is the level necessary to mitigate as much of that risk as possible without breaking us. And just something I'd also like to point out is, our auditors are here right now, and usually after every 1 or 2 days, I sit down with them and I just hear how it's going. And the first bit of positive feedback I got today was you guys have made a lot of improvements just over the past year in your IT systems with multi-factor authentication and things like that, that you've probably seen a lot less spam emails hitting your inbox, and that's because of the great work that IT has done to bolster our system. So I just wanted to add that piece as we have the further discussion. Thanks.
Kevin?
Yeah, even just protecting against ransomware, I mean, that could cost the city, just I didn't say way more than this right here, appropriation. So I think this is appropriate.
But then wouldn't that make my utility bill disappear? Any other assembly comments? Sarah, on the motion as amended?
Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeis?
Yes.
Ms. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Himshoot?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
And Mr. Yested?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
That does bring us past the top of the hour, so we'll go ahead and take a brief recess and come back when we are ready. Thank you. That was a really good one. Back into tonight's agenda. This would bring us to additional new business items, item F.
I move to approve Resolution 2022-28 on first and final reading, affirming the month of October as Filipino American History Month.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Crystal, would you like to introduce this one?
Yeah, this was something that Steve and I, we put together in an attempt, just looking historically at whether or not we've acknowledged this as a city of Sitka. We know 2910 was a big year nationally. That was the first time it was recognized in the United States. Alaska also that same year, they put something forward. So using those as a draft to kind of guide us, that started us down this path. And we recognize that this is now the end of October. So the goal is that on an ongoing basis, just like we do with Indigenous Peoples Day, Native American Heritage Month, that this is something that we'll do with better timing. But this was, I think that's a good intro.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on Resolution 22-28?
Richard Wien. Salamat po is basically all I have to say. The Filipino community has been just an enormously productive community here in Sitka and also back where I come from in New Jersey. Just enormously industrious, intelligent, beautiful people. So I know you're going to pass it.
Kim Elliott. Not that, I mean, I understand and support all of the immigrants into our country. And I say our country, but I was an immigrant too. You know, it's like, hello, we all are Americans. I have no problem with you proclaiming this as a Filipino American History Month, but I want to remind everyone that we are, quote unquote, all Americans and Sitkans as well. But I just think that sometimes all these special designations get kind of confusing. And I just think that, you know, the polar people call me and they say, what is your, you know, history? I said, well, I go back to the time when the English landed in Boston on one side, and then the other side was Mexico, Native American. So what am I? I call myself American, and they get really mad at me. So anyway, I just want you to know that I have no problem with this particular thing. It's just another one of those things that seems to separate us when we should be united. Thank you.
Any other comments on the resolution? Assembly deliberation?
I just wanted to thank you guys for bringing this forward. The Filipino community is one that we don't recognize enough, I don't think. And it's, the people from the Philippines have been a big part of U.S. history going back a lot longer than many of us think. And it's a huge portion of the population of our town. And so I like that we're doing this. Like I say, maybe next year we'll try to get it earlier, but that's great. It's great that we're doing it and we're recognizing it. And I think it helps people to be recognized as an integral part of our community. And so, again, I applaud you guys for bringing this forward, and I will enthusiastically vote for it.
I don't know if Crystal wants to go into her background before. Okay, great.
So just wanted to make a couple of comments because they do address some of the public testimony. So it wasn't that long ago that as a body we came forward and we were united in approving a strategic plan And in that, it outlined a goal that directly relates to this item. And so I felt that this was one way that we could establish that that's something that we do want to work on. So goal number 2 was to improve communication and strengthen relationships within the community and organization. Specifically, action item 2.2 said identify opportunities to foster relationships with underrepresented groups and populations in the community and implement findings to improve service delivery to these groups. So knowing that we are the assembly and it starts at the top, it felt like it would be appropriate for us, once we became aware of the fact that October was Filipino American History Month, to do something special to recognize those community members and their contributions. So this is a resolution to basically extend acknowledgement and gratitude to a large section of our community. I think I might have mentioned in the intro the history. So Congress was the first to officially recognize it in 2009. State of Alaska followed suit. And then I went back and I pulled up 2009 through 2019, and that's assuming that they would have did it in September, which would have been the appropriate time frame. So I went through every year just to see if anything had been done, because maybe this wasn't the first time. I definitely saw in 2011 there was Energy Awareness Month. 2018 there was a proclamation of Domestic Violence Month. Certainly the month of October can stand for many things, but seeing that it had not been celebrated in a way that I think we all acknowledge we would like to have, I wanted to put it out as a resolution so that we could vote and we could basically affirm our feelings towards this community here in Sitka. So, and then of course I kind of, at the table, I ask who is involved, because of course I've stated publicly, nothing about us without us is for us. And so for me, tonight I was acting as an ally. So as we drafted it, of course, Stephen and I, we don't come from this community. And so we wanted to make sure that we worked in partnership with folks who did represent and could review, edit, make recommendations. And so I just want to thank 2 people in particular. One is sitting in the front row, and it is Grace. She goes by Benny Nabua. She was able to put eyes on it, and she made relevant and really important changes to the document. She really improved it, and that's what's in front of you today. And then after we sat down and met about it, I reached out to Dr. E.J. David, a UAA professor in the Clinical and Community Psychology Department. And he also made a couple of changes that improved the document as is. So both of them come from that community and were so supportive as we tried to extend an outreach and say thank you so much. So to them I say salama. And then I hope, if anything, the Filipino community can read this knowing that we do see you, we appreciate you, and moving forward this will become a staple recognition, just like some of the other things that we've recognized throughout the year. So I think that kind of sums it up, and then I'll go ahead and pass it on so that others can weigh in.
Rebecca?
Yeah, I just wanted to express my gratitude to the sponsors bringing this forward, and I think most of us at this table will remember organized events from the Filipino community back, I don't know, 20 years ago. There were performances and events that the Filipino community was more organized, and in some ways maybe more visible because they were an organized community. And so we have kind of lost track of their role in our community a little bit. And so this is fantastic to bring attention to, as Crystal pointed out, a community that was hard to reach through the strategic plan. We were not successful in getting what we thought was meaningful input. And so I really appreciate the co-sponsors of this resolution bringing it forward and getting it in front of us still in October. Thank you.
Kevin? I don't really have much to say because I pretty much reflect everything that everyone said. Excuse me, I'm very grateful. I don't see this as being a divisive thing. We are Americans and Sitkans, and this is just a way of valuing the special, unique aspects of different communities. And I agree with everything everyone said, and I'm grateful that we're able to do this. And thank you. Appreciate it.
As this is the first time that this has come forward before the Assembly, I did want to take a minute and for the public's benefit to read this resolution. And yes, we are still in October, at the end of October. Now that this document does exist, I'm sure it'll come more timely. I think Crystal will do an excellent job of reminding me it needs to come forward. So the resolution, a resolution of the City and Borough of Sitka affirming the month of October as Filipino American History Month. Whereas the City and Borough of Sitka recognizes that the Filipino community is the second largest racial minority group in Alaska and continues to be a long-standing community in Sitka. And whereas after decades of advocacy by organizations like the Filipino American National Historical Society in 2009, Congress designated October as Filipino American History Month, chosen to commemorate the historical moment on October 18th, 1587, when the first Filipinos arrived in what is now Morro Bay, California. And whereas documentation establishes the first Filipinos in Alaska arrived on a whaling ship in the year 1788. At one point referred to as Alaskaroos, particularly in the cannery sector, Filipinos had a broad industry presence in whaling, fur trading, mining, fishing, processing, infrastructure development, and beyond. And whereas our Filipino American neighbors are still an integral part of the economy, their work ethic finds them branching into wider ranging occupations, most notably the healthcare field, where they have high representation as nurses, doctors, and other medical professions. And whereas Filipino Americans have contributed greatly to the fine arts, music, dance, literature, business, journalism, education, science, technology, government, politics, fashion, and other fields in the United States that enrich the landscape of this place. And whereas Filipino American servicemen and servicewomen have a long-standing history in the armed forces from the Civil War to the Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts, including the 25,000 Filipinos who fought under the United States flag during World War II to protect and defend this country. And whereas the U.S. government didn't grant full citizenship and/or voting rights to Asian immigrants until the McCarran-Walter Act of 1952, and whereas it is imperative for the Filipino American youth to have positive role models to instill in them the importance of education, completed with the richness of their ethnicity and the value of their legacy. More so, we recognize the importance of diversity and inclusion at all levels of society, including our government structures, because representation matters. And whereas with their extensive history within our state, we know multiple generations of Filipino Americans have been born and settled roots here. We are beneficiaries that have made this place their home, including their economic, cultural, and societal impacts. And whereas we recognize in 2021, Congress overwhelmingly passed the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act into law after increasing documented crimes targeted against the Asian American Pacific or Islander community. The City and Borough of Sitka exerts xenophobia and racism have no place as Sitka is a safe and welcoming community for all. And whereas the City and Borough of Sitka has a responsibility to oppose the systemic inequities and injustices that exist for communities negatively affected by colonization and oppression, which perpetuates, I'm sorry, I've read many words this evening, perpetuates segregation, discrimination, and hardships such as high rates of poverty and income inequality, exacerbating disproportionate health, education, and social crises. Now, therefore, it be resolved that the City and Borough of Sitka, Alaska, recognizes the celebration of Filipino American History Month, October 2022, as a time of reflection and remembrance, and as a time to renew efforts towards research and examination of history and culture in order to provide an opportunity for all people in the United States to learn with a reminder that Filipino American history is American history, and appreciate more about Filipino nations and their historic and continued contributions to our city, borough, state, and nation. Thank you for all that you do for our community. And I apologize that I did mess up one sentence in there. I was hoping to make it through the entire without an error there. So thank you, Assembly, for bearing with me as I read the resolution. Rebecca?
I'm not sure how it would work, but could we suspend the rules to allow Pastor Jojo to address the assembly past persons to be heard? Would that be a motion I need to make?
You can make a motion to do as such, yes.
She can decline to come forward, but I move to suspend the rules to allow Pastor Jojo to speak.
Second.
Thank you.
Sarah, is that do we go out to public comment on a suspension of the rules? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. The rules have been suspended to allow, thank you for your presence this evening.
Thank you. I am Betty Rizabo, and I'm a pastor of the United Methodist Church of Sitka, and I am very joyful to hear about this resolution. In our culture, we can't lift our own chairs, what you said. And so even if we believe that this is something that is very, very important to our people, we can't even lift a finger, to do something about it. So thank you, Crystal and Mayor Eisenweiss, for this effort. And it's not just the recognition, but the intentional recognition that this is something that is very important for our youth to acknowledge that they do not have to blend in, that they can actually stand out as a people. And before this, I have already been approached by several people. I was approached by the Science Center and the school district too, just because they are intentional about listening to our people and be represented, not just here in, not just their voting, but also in the schools and in the Science Center and the other programs that are being done here to reach out our youth and our people. So thank you. Maraming salamat.
Thank you for speaking this evening. Any further Assembly discussion on the resolution? Sarah, on the resolution?
Okay, on the motion to approve Resolution 2022-28 on first and final reading, Ms. Timshute?
Yes.
Ms. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Mr. Yerstad?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
And Mayor Eisenweiss?
Yes.
The motion passes 6-0 on item I.
Which would bring us to item G.
I nominate, is that the stuff? Yes. Okay.
Correct.
I nominate Benjamin Maisato, Timothy Pike, Carol Boyson, and Richard Ween to serve the remainder of Dave Miller's term until the results of the next regular election are certified on October 10th, 2023. Second.
Is there any public comment on the nominations to serve the remainder of Dave Miller's seat?
Hello, Karen Lucas. I think it would have been helpful to have had an explanation on why the Assembly chose to fill this vacancy in this manner. It's my understanding that the third highest vote getter could have been seated, but this avenue was chosen instead, evidently by the body, which to me indicates a clear bias against Dr. Ween, who received 40% of the votes. It's unfortunate that the resignation happened when it did, leaving you 6 people to decide the merits of the 4 candidates, and which, in my opinion, pretty much disenfranchises 40% of votes. A letter of interest is not, in my book, part of the democratic process. And in the days we're living, we're also skeptical about government, at least I am, And this may be just a timely coincidence. I think it's really important for the Assembly to have a diversity of perspective. And Dr. Ween certainly does his homework. Of the 4 candidates, he is, in my opinion, the most qualified, the most knowledgeable, the one person that has consistently come to these Assembly meetings to share information. And I really want my vote upheld. And I voted for Dr. Ween, as did 40% of the people that voted. I think it would behoove the Assembly to consider the process that you have implemented here. And if for nothing else, to let that, have that diversity come into the Assembly. And I just hope that you can prove me wrong tonight. I don't know how this process works. I mean, maybe these candidates are coming up to speak. Or how do we deliberate this? But thank you for your time.
Comments this evening. Appreciate it.
Good evening. My name is Howard Wayne, and I'm here, like Ms. Lucas. I wanted to honor all the wonderful candidates that have come forward and are seeking this role in our Assembly. I'm one of the 80% of the 2,400 voters that supported the Marine haul out and ship lift. And I recognize that this is a huge investment in the Marine support services in the community. It's a great economic opportunity, and I'm absolutely thrilled with the prospect of, new businesses, new jobs, coming to the community. But I also recognize that an investment like this requires real experience, especially in the early years. And I'm here speaking on behalf of Tim Pike, who I worked with for many years at the Sitka School District. And I understand that he's put his name forward and to serve in the Assembly. And the experience that he has in vocational education, it speaks to me that we need somebody, an optimistic, can-do leader who can help guide this project in the early stages, try to maximize the potential of what we're investing. And Tim, who I couldn't say enough about as a person, but also as an educator. I know he has a lot of experience, not only in welding, diesel mechanics, outboard mechanics, machining. He knows intimately the details of a lot of these jobs that would be starting out there at a haul-out facility or shipbuilding facility. And it just seems like it's important to have a real optimistic person that could help guide this project. So I'm here speaking in support of his candidacy. I was excited to see that he put his name forward. I have voted for him on many occasions as an educator. He's represented me and my colleagues over the years many times, and I find him respectful, incredibly creative, very, very thoughtful. He does his homework. I mean, he's somebody that when he speaks, he has put a lot of thought into what he's going to say. He does his homework, and I've always been nothing but very proud of the representation that he's provided for me and professional education. So I just want you to consider. I know he didn't run in this last election, but he's put his name forward. I haven't talked to him about his candidacy before coming tonight, but I saw in the paper that he put his name forward, and I think he'd be a great person on this show. Thank you very much.
Other public comments on the nominations? Seeing none, come back to the assembly to discuss. Rebecca?
I had a question for Sarah. Can I fire away?
Please.
All right. Sarah, how many times has the assembly, or do you have any information on how the assembly has filled vacancies in the past?
Yeah, thank you. So after our last meeting and then just hearing questions and comments in the public, I did a little bit of digging into past minutes and ballots to see when this had happened before. I went back as far as 2007. That's about the time I started, actually 2008, in the municipal clerk's office. So I put together, I wrote down some notes on, when this circumstance has occurred. So in 2007, John Holst resigned in December of 2007. At that time, the Assembly chose to advertise for letters of interest. They had 5 individuals who applied: Mike Reif, Rick Rollman, Joe Reeves, Steve Ash, and Heidi Raffaelli. So Reeves and Raffaelli were candidates actually in that October 2007 election. Raffaelli was the 4th highest vote getter. Reeves was the 5th highest vote getter, and the Assembly at the time appointed Raffaelli. And then I found another example in 2010. Cheryl Westover was an Assembly member at the time. She was elected mayor. And then, so that created a vacancy. The Assembly chose to advertise for letters of intent. They had 5 individuals apply: John Stein, John Sherrod, Michelle Putz, Peter Spoiro, and Jack Osmond. And 3 of those individuals were candidates on that year's ballot in October 2010. Stein, he was running for mayor, so he came in 2nd place. Osmond was the 3rd highest vote getter. Putz was the 4th highest vote getter. Osmond and Putz, they were running for Assembly. And the Assembly at the time, they appointed Peter Spoiro to serve until the next year. And then another example in 2012, Terry Blake resigned in May of that year, and the Assembly decided to advertise for letters of interest. 6 individuals applied: Jack Osmond, Bill Payton, Michelle Putz, Matt Hunter, Brian Haig, and Sherry Aitken. Osmond and Payton, they were former Assembly members. None of the applicants were candidates in that October 2011 election. And that Assembly chose to appoint Bill Payton to serve. And then the next example I found was in 2014. Phyllis Hackett resigned in December. The Assembly advertised for letters of interest. 5 individuals applied: Orion Hughes Knowles, Tor Christensen, Larry Cruz, Michelle Putz, and Mitch McGraw. So Orion Hughes Knowles and Tor Christensen, they were candidates in the October 2014 election. Orion was running for mayor and came in 2nd, and Tor was running for Assembly, and he was the 3rd highest vote getter. The Assembly at the time chose to appoint Michelle Putz to serve until the next election. And then the last example was when Matt Hunter, he was an Assembly member at the time, was elected mayor, thereby creating a vacant seat. The Assembly, at the meeting in which the election results were certified, discussed options for filling the seat. Some were in favor of soliciting for letters. Others wished to nominate individuals who had stepped forward to run in that election. Alexander Ellison and Aaron Swanson, they were both candidates in the October 2016 election. Swanson was the 3rd highest vote getter. Ellison was the 4th highest vote getter. And the Assembly they made nominations to appoint both those individuals, and Swanson was the majority vote winner, so he served until the next year. So those are the examples that I found going back as far as 2007. I know there's other examples, but that's what I've researched.
Thanks for that, Sarah. And then in the last packet, you have the change for when somebody moves into mayor. When was the change made to not take that it would not be mandatory to take the third top vote getter in that situation? Because one of these was somebody who moved twice, Westover and Hunter, moved to mayor.
I believe it was, I recall, 2004.
And I can look it up.
Or 2002. 2002.
Okay. Thank you.
Stuart? Yes, I remember that. And it was 19 votes. I thought it was 60, but then somebody reminded me that the absentee ballots. So essentially, and like I said at the time, I wasn't picked. I wasn't crazy about that, but the logic given was to put somebody who was as close to Phyllis's perspective as possible. And so I think that they had a point. But I think it's clear that there is no precedent of, okay, we just automatically go to the next vote getter. Because almost by definition, that means the majority of people voted against you. I think it is. But anyway, so I don't personally feel any obligation to go to the next vote getter. I don't think we're disenfranchising anybody. We've got a nice slate of candidates tonight. I'd like to thank everybody for putting their name forward. And I think we can work with whomever's on here. I'm not going to advocate for anyone or any others unless I'd be curious to see if anybody else does. But I think we've got a good group to work with, and I think we should. And whoever we pick will do a good job.
Kevin? Just want to thank everyone who applied, for applying. It's not easy getting an application to get yourself out there. This has been weighing on me heavily for the past, since we decided to put this out. It's no easy solution. No matter who we vote for, there's going to be a portion of people who are disappointed. And that's just the job that comes with the territory. I also do not necessarily believe that the next vote getter it could be, but isn't required to be chosen. It's just my philosophy. I've heard many arguments, both for and against, both very compelling. I'd like to point out as well that this is I'm going to go back. I think someone said it maybe in an email or a comment that this was thwarting the democratic process, and I don't believe that to be true. In my mind, thwarting the democratic process would be if, after this last election, we chose not to certify the election. That would be thwarting. But 2 members were elected assembly. Stephen was re-elected mayor, all duly elected and certified, and that was a democratic process, and it played out effectively. And I'm grateful that we live in a country in a town that can do that. So this is just an awkward thing where a resignation was put in. I do kind of believe also the philosophy we can try to get someone who is kind of close to the person who resigned, their philosophy. But this is a 1-year appointment only. And then at the end of that year, if that person wants to continue on, they have to run an election for that, to fill that term, which would then in fact be 1 year. So it's a struggle. It's been a struggle for me, and I hope that everyone knows that no matter who gets appointed, that there's no hard feelings of anyone who applied. I'm grateful that everyone applied. I'm grateful that we have a community where people are so interested in serving. Those are my comments.
So I'll take an opportunity just to indicate my preference here and the reason why, and I'll keep it short and brief, and we can move on from there, but tonight I'll be supporting Tim Pike. And the reason for that, number one, I find him to be a problem solver. I think this assembly needs that. Number two, I find that he has a vast amount of knowledge, and he speaks with few words. And when he does speak, those words carry impact. And I'm appreciative of that, and I've been appreciative of that for many years working with him on school board level issues, where I find myself in the middle of a jam and I can't quite figure out what's going on between the assembly and the school board. And with very few words, Tim can set me straight and let me know what's going on, and while still allowing me to formulate my own opinion. So that's what I appreciate about him, amongst many other things, but a brief reason of why I will be supporting Tim Pike this evening. Any further assembly, Rebecca?
Yeah, I also have really struggled with this, and one of the things that I did as teacher at heart here, I created a rubric, and I looked for the qualities I'm looking for that would be close to Dave Miller, but also that make our assembly functional, and the qualities I'm not looking for. And I scored everybody. And I'm struggling because my own personal experience of working with Tim Pike, I've worked with Tim a lot more. And I would like to see him on this body, if not now, another time. I think that he will be a real asset to the community. But my top score went to Ben Maisato, and part of that had to do with the diversity of experience he would bring and the fact that he's a prior assembly member, so he can hit the ground running. So I'll be supporting Ben, at least in the first round of voting. That's where I'm going to stand tonight. Thank you.
Crystal?
Okay. I know all of the applicants, and thank you so much for submitting for consideration. I think the thing we're most worried about is that we wouldn't have a pool to choose from, and now we have 4 qualified applicants. Also, the fact that it's a 1-year appointment to finish out until it can go through the democratic process and someone can be elected to fill that seat next year. So knowing everybody who submitted, I know you all in a very different capacity, which is going to be unfair if I take that into consideration. So I saw the letter of interest as an opportunity to sell why that seat belongs to you. And I felt like that might be the most fair. Otherwise, I was filling in the blanks, and I have to be honest, I think Mr. Pike, I know the least of all of them, and I didn't want that to be a disservice to you. So I tried to weigh it based off of the letter. And so based off of that, new to the community but involved in the community, I think I'm going to support Carol in this first round of votes, just because she detailed out 3 pages of what she's seen at the table, what she brings to the table, kind of what her background is. And I just have to note, that's all that we asked for, and of course that's in code, but I will say with Casey Campbell, for example, who was applying for a commission or an appointment to GPEP, we got the 1-page application, which is standard. We also got a letter of interest, which kind of explained, just as it did here, but then a resume. So it was really hard based off of just a letter, but that's what we asked for. And the reason that I went off of that, like I said, is because I know you all very differently, and I want to use that to say, here's who I think should come forward, and yet in history, people are going to look back at the packet and they're going to say this was what they submitted for consideration. So going off of that, based off of the letter of interest, and knowing that all 4 of you are outstanding citizens of Sitka, it's a hard one, but that's where I'm at.
Rebecca?
I'm sorry to speak again on this, but I wanted to point out that I struggled with that same situation, and at some point it would be, I don't want to limit future assemblies and how they make appointments. At the same time, spelling out more of the information that we would like to have could be really beneficial. A resume is not too much to ask, I think. But we didn't in this case. And so going forward, maybe we want to look more deeply at how we do this process, and maybe we want to keep it wide open. But I think it's worth a discussion down the road.
I would agree in this instance, code is fairly wide open as to how and when and who we appoint. So I think it could be a beneficial exercise down the road.
So how do we want to do this? I mean, do we want to just go around and name it, or do we want to do a ballot? How do you guys want to do it?
Unless there is a motion for a secret ballot, then Sarah would simply call on us for a vote. Any further assembly deliberation? Sarah, please.
Mr. Mosier?
Tim Pike.
Ms. Duncan?
Carol Poisson.
Ms. Timshoot?
Ben Maisato.
Mr. Yestat?
Richard Ween.
Mr. Christensen?
Mr. Pike.
And Mayor Eisenbeis.
Pike.
Okay, we'll have to go to a second round of voting. Ben received 1 vote, Tim Pike received 3, and Carol and Richard each received 1. All right, so on to round 2. Mr. Christensen?
Pike.
Mayor Eisenbeis?
Pike.
Ms. Duncan?
Tim Pike.
Mr. Mosier?
Tim Pike.
Mr. Yested?
Tim Pike.
And Ms. Timshoot?
Ben Maisato.
Mr. Pike has received 5 votes, so he is appointed. And Tim, if you could come forward and we'll do your oath.
Congratulations.
Camera. Gotta be front and center, sorry, I don't get off that easy.
Yeah.
I, Timothy Pike,
Do solemnly affirm
do solemnly affirm
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States of America,
the Constitution of the United States of America,
the Constitution of the State of Alaska,
the Constitution of the State of Alaska,
and the laws and ordinances
and the laws and ordinances
of the City of Berlin, Sitka,
of the City of Berlin, Sitka.
and that I will faithfully discharge my duties
I will faithfully discharge my duties
as an Assembly member for the City and Borough of Sitka
as an Assembly member for the City and Borough of Sitka
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my abilities.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So as a shop teacher, does he have to make his own plate?
Only if it's metal. Welcome, Tim. Looking forward to working the next year with you. Sarah will be in touch with you. She's got a whole lot of onboarding stuff, some light homework for you. Probably don't know anything about homework, but Sarah or someone from her office will be in touch here shortly for questions. That does wrap up item G. That'll bring us to persons to be heard. This is public participation for any item on or off tonight's agenda, not to exceed 3 minutes. Is there anyone who'd like to address the assembly this evening?
Good evening, Assembly. I like to view things as win-win. Should I have a seat on the Assembly, it would be a win. because 3 minutes just turns out to not be enough time, either not to be enough time. But if I am not on it, I will still continue to come here. But I'm also very creative, and I feel that it's important. One of the things I've noted is that not many people pay attention to the assembly and their deliberations and so forth. And so I will hopefully use some of that creativity to, I'll say, bring forth a message that the assembly has to give. I have to say I did make a little money today, and because things are so predictable, you know, it's, I did call my bookie. His name is Nicky. He's a Greek extraction, and he's in Vegas, and I put 20 on Mr. Pike. So, but then again, there were even odds, so I got my money back. And so I congratulate him for being here. But one thing I do have to say is that you left me off the hook. You let me off the hook. Because I believe, and I keep talking about the economy, etc. And Sitka is very sensitive to economic things. You can want all of these things, but unless the federal government or the state is going to shower us with largesse, we may find that the future will be very interesting. And so I feel that I was let off the hook because I won't have to make the important decisions. That means my budget for popcorn will increase, and I just would like to say I'll be seeing you every 2 weeks, but I'm going to switch up the items. So my dedication, and I hope that one thing I do have to say in 51 seconds is that I think it was 2004-55, the ordinance that Mayor Dapsevich made, and the reason is that they had it in 2004 where they put out people of interest is because Dapsevich and Reeder were, because Dapsevich came up from the assembly and Reeder and him were candidate combatants, and Marco won and Fred did not. But because Fred was the second winner, Marco offered Fred the seat on the assembly that he left, and Fred said no. So then they had to look for somebody. So it was a completely different situation, and I got that from Marco. I was a good journalist and interviewer.
Thank you for your time this evening. Is there anyone else who'd like to address the assembly any on or off of tonight's agenda?
Hello all, Dave Miller. I would like to congratulate Mr. Pike. I never knew he had a first name. All the years that my kids went to school, all I ever heard was Mr. Pike. I'm surprised that he's got Tim. How does that happen? At the last meeting, it was brought up, and I heard a young lady told me that it started going around a little bit, that I think it was strategically turned in my notice when I did. There was nothing strategic about that. About a month prior to that, I found out I had AFib, and my body just said, man, all you want to do is sleep, Dave. And that's about all I really want to do is sleep. I get up in the morning, take a nap, hang on a while, take a nap. So that's my whole day. I went down to the doctor, just so that everybody knows out there in the world, I went down to the doctor at Swedish Hospital last week, and see it even running out of air just talking here. And I spent 8 hours there shoving stuff down my throat and in my arms and everything else. And it's nothing super serious, nothing that somebody else hasn't had in the world and doesn't have right now. But I have a mitral valve that's prolapsed, And they rate those things according to serious to minor or something like that. And it's in the serious category, so they're gonna go in, open me up and go in and fix that, hopefully, or replace it. And then they're also at the same time gonna do a maze ablation, whatever that is, to get rid of the AFib. And so, at some point in time, the doctor said, no, you'll be back to 99% of what you were before. That probably doesn't mean I'm gonna be running any marathons, because I never did that before, but at least I'll be better off than I am now. The big problem is that, like everybody else in the country, they're having a worker shortage. He said, normally we could get you in a week or two and get it done. But he says, now it could be 2 or 3 months. This is at Swedish Hospital, because they don't have any help. He said he had been at an international conference of heart surgeons, and that was the big discussion. There is no help to help them do all these surgeries. So everything is just sort of piling up a little bit. So we'll see what happens. But turning to my notice was nothing strategically done about that. I don't know why it would have ever came up. It was just the time, if you noticed, I think the meeting prior to that, I left after an hour because I just couldn't stay awake any longer, so I left. That's sort of how my life is now, and I wasn't going to put this assembly through me sleeping during the meeting. Thank you.
Anyone else to address the assembly on or off the agenda?
Thank you, Mayor. Benjamin Miasano, members of the Assembly, and to the now appointed Mr. Pike. Congratulations, good luck to you. I am thankful for the opportunity to have submit my name for your consideration. I know what you folks do up there is not easy. None of it is. There are going to be people who will not be happy with what your votes are. With that being said, it is good that you are working well together and to be moving forward with what has to be done in the city. Mayor Eisenbeis, I've always been impressed with you. I thank you for stepping up and going for another round of leading the city. It's not an easy job. It isn't. Having sat up there, I know that it was very stressful, but it was also very rewarding to those in the public. I always say, if you want to be a part of the process, please run for office. I know myself, I have taken a break for 3 years because I needed it. I did both city government and tribal government at the same time, which I should not have ever done because it was so darn difficult. But I was thankful for the chance and opportunity that I have had to serve our community. Each of you have a role to play, and I'm hoping that that role that you do is to be able to listen to both sides of the issue. Thank you once again for all that you do.
Anyone else to address the assembly this evening? Seeing none, that'll bring us on to reports. For my report this evening, I did have an opportunity, I believe it was yesterday, to meet with some CLIA representatives and talk about this last cruise season. We expressed, the meeting went very well. I think we have a great working relationship with CLIA now, which I'm extremely excited about. I went many years sitting on this council without even knowing who the representatives were. So it's good that we now have a working relationship with them. We expressed some of our concerns. We expressed some of our views from this year, and we made sure that, and I think their member agency, their member cruise lines already know this, but we made sure that they were taking back the message of the efforts that we put in this year. I think we did a lot in a very short amount of time in order to help facilitate a successful visitor season, and I wanted to make sure that the cruise lines that visit Sitka were well aware of all those efforts that we put in. I say we when I mean Amy Ainsley and John Leach and their staff. So, and the Planning Commission for making that plan. So, yeah, that meeting went very well, and I look forward to continuing conversations with them. We did ask for some more information so that we could better plan next year, and hopefully some of that information will be forthcoming. John, reports this evening?
Thanks, Mayor. I have two things. First, since the vote on the haul out and the funding, our project team met to do a bit of a kickoff and make sure that we're all on the same page with the plan. I'm going to use a term that we used in aviation, and it was slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And that's how we're going to approach this, not meaning we're going to approach it slow. It means we're going to approach it very measured, and we're going to follow the project process. This is going to be a facility built at GPIP, and this will live in the GPIP fund. The plan is to come forward with the capital appropriation necessary to move this project forward. And a lot of the public discussions are going to happen at GPIP. We've already discussed with the board about the possibility of having an increased cycle of meetings, so we're providing more information. But step one that my team is working on is putting together a project charter. That formalized project charter is kind of like the set of rules and what the project milestones look like and what we're going to do. So as soon as that is developed, we'll be coming forward with that. The last thing I have is I was unable to attend the Child Care Awareness Fair on the 22nd, but I was able to meet with some of the stakeholders, and Blue Shibler is her name. She was here leading and facilitating the group in an issue that's nationwide essentially. So if you remember from our strategic plan, we have to figure out what the city's role is in things like childcare and housing, and one of the things our planner helped us with is, if nothing else, we need to at least be the convener of all these groups, and I went forward with that message that we're happy to be that center point to help get everybody talking. So I expect to hear more on that, but I was very pleased to see the representatives that were in the room, so I expect more on that topic soon.
And thank you for reminding me. I was able to attend the fair, but not the community leaders meeting. And I think the leaders meeting was probably more well-suited for yourself. While at the fair, there was a lot of discussions that were happening, a lot of children that came up. One child care center that I spoke to put another 10 kids on their waiting list, but gave out no applications for jobs, if that kind of indicates where things are going right now. So it was great discussion. I think I was there for 2.5 hours or so, and I even got a nice healthy apple out of the deal. Brian.
Yes, thank you. Just a heads up to the assembly and the community on some significant legislation that's in the works for this fall and early winter. The tour operators permit code is first in line. It should be coming up here in the next meeting or so. We're doing a ordinance related to donation and naming policies, and also the taxi cab code is going to be looking at some rewriting going to be done. I consider those significant. I think the community stakeholders keep an eye out and an ear out for those and participate in the process. On a specific note to the legal department, in early December I'll be traveling to Anchorage for the Alaska Municipal Attorney Association, and I always find those rewarding, inspiring to mingle with my colleagues and to go to continuing legal education for municipal attorneys up there, and I've found them very beneficial in the past, and I expect them to be the same. Thank you.
Any liaison representatives this evening? Speaking of that, Tim, I think there are a few open ones that you have suddenly now adopted. Sarah will also be in contact about those. Sarah, report this evening.
I wanted to remind folks that absent absentee voting for the general election, which is conducted by the state of Alaska. Absentee voting started yesterday here at Harrigan Hall. The hours are 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. That'll continue through November 7th, and then the election is on November 8th here at the Centennial Building. Both of our precincts are here. The polls will be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Let's see what else. We have a number of vacancies on our boards and commissions. If you're interested in serving on one, you're welcome to contact our office, and we'll give you a rundown on what seats are open. The November 8th assembly meeting, we will be meeting in the auditorium due to the election happening in the building. So this room will be used for precincts, so we'll be meeting over there. I think that's it.
Thank you. Any other reports this evening? Seeing none, brings us to adjournment.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you for your time this evening. We are adjourned.